Hello, heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the witch's wheel of the year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Welcome back, my friends. This week is going to be a shorty because life. This is Litha season, super full strawberry Dyad moon in Sagittarius, lunar week 19. That is a lot of words. We will get into what they mean in just a second. Let me do the, roundup, or I guess it's not the roundup. We're not at the end. See what I mean? I'm not with it right now. Thank you for bearing with me during this trying time. The Litha class was supposed to be Sunday, June 12th, but my streaming software melted down before my eyes as I was putting the class together. So we didn't teach that, unfortunately, which is a bummer. I will be teaching that class next week on the solstice. What day is that? Tuesday the 21st, I believe, is when I'm going to teach that. And I am not going to be teaching it on YouTube this time, because that requires streaming software. I believe what I'm going to do is teach this as a Zoom class. And it won't be as fancy. Won't be able to do all of the fancy stuff that I'm able to do in my live streams, but we will still cover the most pertinent elements. It's still going to be free for everyone. And then I will upload the class to YouTube after that. I don't know, a couple days later. The benefit of this is that we will be more, it'll be more of a community setting. And this is something that I've been thinking about trying with the classes for a while. So, you know, turning lemons into lemonade kind of a thing. It's a thing I have to do frequently in this life. So we're going to roll with it. Will I do it again after this? I don't know. We'll see how this rolls out. And we'll see what the feedback is. We'll see if you guys like it more or like it less. But I'm looking forward to it, even if it's just a change of pace. I'm very disappointed that the class didn't happen when I wanted it to happen. But, such is life on Earth in 2022, right? We just need to go with the flow sometimes. What did I say last week and the week before? We may be forced to downgrade. We may be forced to downshift, and it might feel like a real disappointment, right? If only I had remembered my words yesterday, because boy, was I in a terrible mood after that. I literally ended everything. It was just like meh, and posted on on Patreon, and then put my big fuzzy robe on and laid in bed and ate cookies and pouted. It's just like meh, everything is stupid. I don't want to do anything ever again. It passed, but it took a minute. I was very tilted. But we're back. We're back. We're recuperating now. So, even us witches, right? Even those of us who are reading the stars and advising and guiding other people in theory, we too can have our tantrums. So I put myself in timeout and I took a moment, right? And I let myself, roll around on the floor and kick and scream for a while. And then we got back up and we're gonna get it done. I like the idea of teaching on the Sabbath. I always teach early. I always teach before the Sabbath so that you all will have information to work with for the Sabbath. But that's not the way we're doing it this year. It's just what it is. Side note, it was funny because I went back and looked at my 2021 Litha class to share that with people. And I had problems with that live stream too. So maybe there's something about the Litha classes where I need to be a little bit more on my game magically, or just start preparing for them like a month out. I don't know. Okay. So Litha class didn't go off on June 12th. Hopefully is going to happen June 21st. It will be a Zoom meeting. I will be posting that on Patreon. I'm going to send that address out to everybody that's signed up to the newsletter, and I'm also going to post it on my website. Again, that's going to be free for everyone to join. And then again, it's going to be a little bit more community oriented. We might have a little bit or a lot of bit of a question and answer at the end of class. I don't know. We're going to see how it all rolls out. As often it is with me, it's an experiment. We're just going to see how it works. But the information will be dispensed. If you are gnashing at the bit for Litha information, go watch my 2021 class. Check out the Litha page on my website. I have a lot of writing up there. We've done this work. We will do it again. What else do I want to say? You can read more about this stuff on my website if you want to know more about upcoming classes and whether or not they're actually going to happen. If you want to know more about the Wheel of the Year, tarot, witchcraft, sign up for my irregular newsletter. Also a great way to get things like this in your mailbox. And if you're looking for guidance, book a tarot or astrology reading with me. Side note, good luck, because I'm just about booked out for this entire month and already starting to book for July. So if you're wanting to book with me, book soon. To support this podcast and all the work that I do, join my Patreon. Thank you so much to all my patrons who put up with my foolishness and my stuff breaking down occasionally. You can also leave a rating or a review on the podcast service that you listen to this through. If you're feeling especially heathenish, you can leave a rating. That's always wonderful. And sharing the podcast is one of the best ways that you can support me. Posting this on social media, telling friends and family, playing the podcast for your coworkers, all of that stuff. So appreciate folks in community who trust my work and want to share it with their friends and family and their loved ones. It's really special and it's really, really cool. Okay. What are we doing in Litha season? We're just in the last days of Beltane season, technically. We're about to transfer over into Litha season. So to round us out on Beltane season, fertility, fecundity, and action. As we step into Litha season, it is all about action, transformation, maturation, and power. In Litha, I guess I should say it this way, in spring, Ostara, Beltane season, we are curious, we're exploring, we are trying stuff. We are naive, and that's good. We want to not know so that we can go find out. In Litha season, we need to start to become a little more determinative with the work that we're doing. Springtime is about exploration. Summertime is about determination and maturing into our power, maturing into our responsibility. And I will talk more about this stuff in the class, I swear. Litha season also is kind of, it has a foot in both worlds in the sense that it's kind of a communal event and it's kind of a private event. And a big part of that is because see, I'm about to go off because I'm so primed to teach this class that I'm just like ready to say all of these things. Like I'm all ready to do this. Okay. But the things that we are doing at Litha communally to celebrate the season, to celebrate the zenith of the solar power, that stuff starts in spring, and it sort of continues through Ostara, through Beltane season, and through Litha. It's like a giant complex, basically, of festivals and observation and rites and rituals and observances and witchcraft and spellcraft and magic that we're doing, and one portion of the season rolls into the next. So where we have been experimenting, now we want to start committing to things, and we want to start claiming things and taking things up, and again, embracing our power and embracing the responsibility that comes along with that power. Okay, so let's talk about this full moon because she's spicy. They are spicy. Um, First and foremost, let's look at this big old title that this moon has. Super full strawberry dyad moon. Um, Super. We've talked about super moons and micro moons before here on the podcast. There's lots of information on the internet about super moons and micro moons. But TLDR, the moon in its orbit around the planet Earth wobbles a little bit. And at points in the orbit, it's a little bit closer to Earth. And at some points, it's a little bit further away. Those points where the moon comes a little bit closer, those are super moon moments. And in particular, we really pay attention to it on the full moons because that's when we can see it. So when we have the moon a little bit closer and it's a full moon, it's a super full moon. The moon will look a little bit larger in the sky. I think where you really can notice it is at moonrise, when the moon is close to the horizon, because it already looks a little bit bigger. It's an optical illusion. Um, but uh, add that super in, and it actually looks a bit bigger. It's pretty cool. Micromoons, in turn, are when the moon is a little bit further away from the Earth in its orbit, and so it looks a little bit smaller than it normally would. So that's the super element of this moon. Full, I think we understand that. Strawberry moon. Strawberry is one of the many names for the June full moon. It has a lot of different moons. Honeymoon is also one of them. Wild, because there's so much marriage imagery at this time of year. So, I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And then the other name is the Dyad moon. And the Dyad moon is the name given to the last full moon of spring. And this is the last full moon of spring. Full moons are a type of culmination, climax, completion, a variety of other words that start with C, but full moons really kind of represent the apex, in a sense, of our process, the high point of the process, or the portion of the process where things start to come together and we see results from actions. That stuff can play out in our personal life, and it can play out in the big picture of the community or the civilization, the country that we live in. And without getting too heavy-handed with the symbolism and too freaked out by astrology, because we have free will, damn it. But Sagittarius is the place in our chart that speaks to religious beliefs, religious practices, um, religious institutions, all of that stuff. And in a different world, that could be really cool. In America, that gets super funky when you have Christo fascists running around terrorizing everyone. And so, um, the astrology for this week is funky. And again, we have free will. And if this is unsettling for you or destabilizing, turn off the podcast. If you're like, I don't want to hear any more bad news, hit me up next week. If you're like, I want to be forewarned, please continue. This full moon is square to Neptune. And of course, when we have a full moon, that means it's opposite the sun. And so we have a T square forming between Neptune, the sun, and the moon. And anytime we have a square from Neptune, things get weird. Everything gets a little hazy, foggy, nebulous, confusing. Boundaries are obliterated. And because it's a square, it's a harsh aspect, it's a hard aspect. And so our boundaries can be violated. And that can be just psychological or emotional. It could be verbal, right? It could be just community stuff, or it could be something like really extra funky. So we've got, a blurring of boundaries, fogginess, nebulousness, and some like heavy-handed religiosity here, right? It's kind of it's a funky mix of stuff. This can feel like really anxiety inducing. This whole situation can feel overwhelming, and sometimes overwhelming for no reason, like nothing's wrong, but I just feel like I can't handle it. Right? So not super great stuff. And when Neptune is involved, even with positive aspects, things can get really confusing very quickly. And if we are in a good space and we are engaging that kind of energy from an empowered place, from a stabilized place, from a I'm willingly going into this, that fogginess and nebulousness can be very dreamy and very wonderful and very fantasy, right? And who wouldn't, who couldn't use a little fantasy, right? Is mostly nightmare, right? But that's the other side of Neptune's experience when we are dealing with harsh aspects from the planet. It tilts more into nightmare, victimization, martyrdom. And those are not great words when we're thinking about all of that other stuff, right? Religiosity, etc., etc. So if you haven't been keeping up with the news, you might check out what happened over this last weekend in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. They were holding their Pride Festival, and 30 some domestic terrorists, white supremacist fascists, from a group called Patriot Prayer, I believe is what they're called, um, rolled up with riot gear and started pouring out of a moving van. They had concealed weapons, and they were clearly there to hurt people, cause a riot, who knows what. Many of the same people that helped organize that group helped organize the torch procession that happened in Charlottesville a few years ago, where a woman was murdered and run over by a car. So, these people have not gone away. They are becoming more emboldened. They're becoming, they are full of themselves, and they are swelling. And this kind of astrology doesn't cause that, I don't believe, but I do believe it's like a road sign on the side of the road. Hey, fascists ahead. So with all of these spooky aspects from Neptune, this is also not a great week necessarily for purposefully losing control. So escapist behaviors like doom scrolling for hours on end, or heavy duty drug use, and you know what that means for you, or shopping incessantly, right? Like whatever our escapist behaviors are, those mechanisms of coping might really want to jump to the front this week, to just escape the overwhelm of life on Earth. And I encourage you not to engage in your unhealthy coping mechanisms. I do encourage you to engage in your healthy coping mechanisms. Do your stretches in the morning. Make sure you're drinking enough water. Make sure you're eating enough meals throughout the day. That's another thing that can come up with Neptune, is a real detachment from the body, and a detachment from the physical plane. And so we can literally forget to eat and forget to take care of our physical body. So stretching, deep breathing, especially if you are a person who tends to embody your anxiety. This is a week where I really encourage you to ramp it back down to the fundamentals and really tune into your physical corpus, your body, and take care of it, and soothe it and hold it, right? If it helps, think of your body like your best friend's body. And how would you be helping them if they were overwhelmed with anxiety? What would you be doing to assist them? You maybe need to approach yourself in that same way if it helps. Okay, so that's what's up with this moon. Lots of fun stuff, right? I know. Last but not least, let me talk about that dyad word. A dyad is a big concept that ultimately kind of whittles down to opposing forces. And that's sort of the name of the game here. In the words of Jessica Lanyadoo, talking about the astrology of this week, I deeply and profoundly encourage you to pick your battles wisely, which probably means stepping away from a majority of them. This is a week where our pride and our defensiveness, our martyrdom, might really want to jump in there and have something to say about everything and get all up in the mix, and ultimately potentially lead us into some adventures that we don't actually want to go on, and lead us into some funky situations that we do not actually want to be in. So there might be multiple times where you have to kind of look at yourself and say, no, we're not getting involved in this. This is not our battle. I will often say to myself, this is not my circus. These are not my monkeys. This is not my diaper to change. Could I jump in and try to be of some assistance? Sure. But am I going to get myself killed? Am I going to get myself hurt? Am I going to bring danger and risk to the people around me? If the answer is yes, then is this actually my battle, right? Is this actually worth me suffering some kind of injury, psychic, physical, whatever? This week is really here to kind of hand us some bullshit. And so I encourage you to not step in it. As always, you can always put yourself in timeout when, if activating or triggering events occur around you, do whatever you can to take a breath, count a few beats before you speak, before you act. If you have that kind of a moment to think before you move, I heavily encourage it this week. All right, after all of that good news, I'm going to run quickly through the astrology of this week, and then I'm going to talk about just a couple of holy days for this week, and we're going to call it. I hope it's enough for you all. Tuesday the 14th at 4:51 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day for everybody else, we have our super full strawberry dyad moon at 23 degrees of Sagittarius. As I said, this is square to Neptune, funky business. You can always step away. You can always take a breath. You can always pull yourself out of the situation. Don't get wrapped up in the bullshit. If there's good stuff about this, I'm not sure what it is. No, JK. Talking about that dyad moon, that dyad element of this again. The opposite sign to Sagittarius is Gemini. And Gemini wants facts. Gemini wants knowledge. It wants information. Sagittarius is about belief. And that's the dichotomy between these two. Those are the opposing forces in Sagittarius and Gemini. Gemini is intellect, Sagittarius is wisdom. And they both have their place, right? And there's stuff that both of them can't do or don't understand. So this could be a full moon that brings in some really interesting information or opens up, a journalistic avenue, free press, something, something. Um, there could be some movement around that, where some more information around some of the wildly funky bullshit that's happening in our country and the world comes to the fore. It won't necessarily be positive news, but it might be really important information about stuff that's going on. All right, moving on to Wednesday the 15th. The super fun astrology that we have for this day is Mars conjunct Chiron in Aries at 15 degrees. This is a tough transit. This is a transit where, like, if you can stay home, you might. Uh, I don't like to be super heavy handed with my interpretation of astrology. Again, I think that the planets are indicators of patterns, not creating things. I don't think that they necessarily make things happen. I think of the planets as like road signs. There's the Grand Canyon exists and there's a sign on the side of the road that says Grand Canyon next right. The sign didn't make the Grand Canyon be there. It was there and there's a sign. All right. That all being said, Chiron is our sacred wound. And Mars is our sacred warrior. And getting these two together in the best of circumstances can be pretty spicy. What it does is it lends a profound righteousness to our defensiveness or our offensiveness. And so words like violence are right there in the front. Aggression, toxic masculinity, or just toxic behavior in general. Doesn't even have to be coming from our mask, community members. But it is a time where, the sacred wound is saying, I've been cheated, I've been jaded, I've been abandoned in this way or that way. And here comes Mars saying, yeah, let's fight about it. Let's argue about it. Let's hurt somebody the way that we hurt. That stuff. And there are a lot of people in this country that are fired up for a whole bunch of bullshit reasons. And there's a lot of people in this country that are fired up for really profoundly important reasons. And all of those folks, at any time on this day, all of us might be in a place in our cycle where we feel like, fuck it, you know what? Set the whole thing on fire. You know what? I hurt. I'm going to make sure you hurt too. So we just want to be as present as we can possibly be with ourselves this week and not fall into that trap of reactionary violence, right? And reactionary aggression. Also defend yourself. I'm not going to say don't. But again, pick your battles wisely this week. And if you don't need to fight that battle, step away. Step away. Thursday the 16th, we have a couple different things going on. We have the Sun in Gemini trine Saturn retrograde in Aquarius at 25 degrees. This might feel like a grounding moment in all of this turmoil. This might feel like a moment of stability where you kind of come back to your senses a little bit, or like things slow down a little bit. But also remember, Saturn is conservatism. It wants tradition. It wants the status quo. It wants the structure of bureaucracy. And so, this could be a moment where things mellow out a little bit, or it could be a moment where the bureaucracy steps in and is like, now, kids, and then arrests the wrong person. That thing. Also on this day, we have Venus in Taurus conjunct the North Node at 22 degrees, bringing a very fated element to everything, a feeling of like, this has to happen, this must happen, this is supposed to happen, I'm supposed to be going in this direction, right? Mixing that in with everything that else that we've talked about. Now, are you getting me why I'm making that emphasis of pick your battles wisely? The North Node is not always right. I know I'm probably pissing off an astrologer somewhere, but I'm saying it. Hot take of the week. The North Node is not always right. The information and the suggestions that we get from the North Node are, whether they are true for us or not, is totally a subjective trip that we have to go on. So again, pick your battles wisely. Also on this day, we have the Sun in Gemini square Neptune in Pisces at 25 degrees. So here's more of that cloudy, weird, nebulous, foggy, victimized, martyred energy potentially coming through from Neptune. It's a square. So it doesn't feel like it's here to help. It feels like it's here to add to the confusion. This is another day. It might be kind of excuse me, kind of dragging out the feelings of the full moon here a couple days later. And again, as I said earlier in the week, with Neptune influence, there can be a real urge to detach from the body. And that can just be escapist, playing games on your phone for 6 hours, whatever. I'm not judging you. But it could be, engaging in some pretty intense escapist behaviors too. Again, not a super great time for hardcore drug use, and you know what that means for you. It might be a week of no drug use for you if that's the super appropriate approach. But just be present with yourself, and also remember to eat. I'm saying that again. Remember to eat. Remember to fuel the body and attend to the body's needs, because we really don't want to when we are getting these hard aspects from the planet Neptune. Okay, moving on to Friday the 17th, we have the disseminating moon in Aquarius at 9:15 a.m., 11 degrees of Aquarius. And you're going to hate this. The disseminating moon in Aquarius is all about hope. I know, right? In the middle of this week. You're like, I was like, really? Okay. You know what? You know what? Fine. I'll hope. I'll show you hope. There really is no astrology of note for this day. So this day may actually genuinely feel like a bit of a reprieve from the super heavy, funky vibes of the 3 days before this. When we are working with the waning moon in Aquarius, I don't have the plant stuff in front of me. Sorry, I'm not gonna pull it up. Sorry. But when we're working with the waning moon in Aquarius, we are resting and relaxing and restoring the legs, in particular the knees, and ankles, I guess, to a lesser extent, but the legs in total kind of fall under the auspices of Aquarius. And yeah, so it might be a day to just kick up your feet, do some deep breathing, try to concentrate on what is positive in your life, what is moving forward, the things that you love about your friends and family, the things that you love to share with them, and the people in your life that bring you hope, the people that you look up to, mentors, celebrities. I don't know who your people are, your icons that you work with, your teachers, your guides. But the folks, the entities, the environments, the wisdom resources that restore your hope and bring you hope. I mean, with everything else going on this week, in a way, it's like, how dare you? But in a way, it's like, yes, obviously, this would be exactly the time to focus on something like that. Moving into Saturday the 18th, we have a little bit of astrology on this day as well. We have Venus in Taurus square Saturn retrograde in Aquarius at 25 degrees. This brings more funky vibes in, right? It's a square to Saturn. Who is ever excited about that? mostly no one. Um, and what can this feel like? This can be really hard for Venus and the Venusian aspects of ourself. So, on the surface, on the mundane level, this could be spending issues. Like you might really want to drop some cash on something, and Saturn is like, nope, we don't have the budget for that. Look, a bill just came through that you forgot about, and there goes money out of your checking account that you thought you had. Or something else that kind of puts a restriction, puts a boundary, puts a border on something. But this also can feel like a real moment for the inner critic to come up around your Venusian aspects. So this could be a day where you're feeling insecure about your looks. You might be feeling insecure about your style. You might be really critical of like, "Oh, I hate this haircut. Oh my god, I don't like the way I look. Oh, I don't have anything to wear in my closet. I hate all of this stuff." It could just be one of those days where just nothing fits right, nothing feels right, and just kind of a bummer. It could also play out in a feeling very lonely, feeling super unattractive kind of a vibe. Um, and on the world level or on the country level, it could play out as like a real bummer moment for queer folks or women or femmes. Again, with our Roe v. Wade situation that we have happening in this country and all of the ridiculous shit that's going to happen after that if it actually goes through. Um, this could be a day where some bummer information comes through around that. Just brace yourself, and be prepared. Also on this day, we have Venus, again, sextile Neptune at 25 degrees. Venus in Taurus, Neptune in Pisces. Now, this normally would actually be a really lovely transit. It's a sextile to Neptune. And so this is a moment where Neptune gets to be like dreamy and sweet and lovely and fantasy and wishes and, oh, it's sweet. But within the context of everything else that's going on in this week, what it feels like more is we just end up wanting to kind of go with the flow and being really passive about things versus asserting ourselves and saying our authentic needs out loud or being honest about our authentic feelings or our authentic fears or our authentic wishes or our real self. We might want to just gloss over it, just keep it cute and whatever. So that's what's up with the 18th. On the 19th, we have no astrology really of note, and that is more or less the end of our lunar week. So now I'm going to talk about just two of the holy days that we are having this week. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I know. Patrons, I have already updated the bag of holding with the Litha folder in it. So you have the new calendar in the workbook already. So you guys can go and look at what the holy days are for this week. If you would like to know, sign up to Patreon. Everybody at the Venus level and higher, $9 and higher, gets access to the workbook and the calendar. Yeah, that's just a way for me to pay my bills, guys. That's it. Just being real. Just being real. Okay, let's talk about these holy days. Okay, the first holy day that I want to talk about is from our Greek friends and ancestors, and it is called Boufonia. And Boufonia is part of a holiday complex or a festival season that was happening for Athenian Greeks called the Dipolia. And this was a religious festival held within the midsummer time, within the month of Scirophorion, which is where we are. And in this, a beast of burden is sacrificed, specifically a working ox. So an ox that was used to work the land. Now that's potent symbolism in and of itself, right? Ox, Taurus, working the land. Here we are in springtime at the very end of Beltane season, and this whole season is about working the land and preparing it for the growth cycle and all of that stuff. Okay, so that's already pretty spicy. But what specifically is this? Well, reading from Wikipedia, a group of oxen was driven toward the altar at the temple where this festival would take place at the highest point in the Acropolis. On the altar was a sacrifice of grain that had been spread out by members of the various families that were attending the ritual. When one of the oxen began to eat the grain, one of the family members steps forward with an axe, slays the ox, and then immediately throws aside the axe and flees the scene. Now, what I think is very spicy and very wild about this ritual is the way that it was thought about by the people who attended it, because as far as they were concerned, the ox that, like, all the ox are being driven towards this altar, right, where all of this grain has been laid out. The ox that steps forward and begins to eat the grain, as far as the humans are concerned, this ox has self-chosen, self-selected itself for sacrifice. This whole thing reeks so much of what we are seeing in our country, to me, with guns and gun rights and gun violence and all of that stuff. Now, maybe this is me projecting a whole lot and stretching a whole lot, but this idea is just wild to me. Again, reading directly from Wikipedia, details of the rite can be reconstructed in detail, thanks to a variety of Greek writers and various sources. Although the slaughter of a laboring ox was forbidden, it was excused in these exceptional circumstances because the ox had gone up itself, right, and done this thing. Nonetheless, it was regarded as a murder. The axe, therefore, as being polluted by the murder, was immediately afterward carried before the court, which tries the inanimate object for murder. And after the water bearers who lustrated the axe, the sharpeners who sharpened it, the axe bearer who carried it, each deny in turn responsibility for the murder of the ox. The guilty axe is charged with having caused the death of the ox, for which then the axe is acquitted. What? Now, this is referred to as a comedy of innocence. Yeah, no shit. I mean, it's just insane to me, right? The enactment of this comedy of innocence and the joint feasting of all who participated, save the murderer themselves, individual consciences were assuaged, and the polis, or the people, the spirit of the people, was reaffirmed. The burden of guilt was doubly displaced, not only through the buck passing of the trial, but also through the apparently guilty act of the oxen in selecting itself through the initial eating. What? Sometimes with these holidays, I'm just like, it's too close. It's too damn close, you guys. I mean, I really don't even know what to say. It just is so loud to me. It's so loud to me. These things are really similar to me. I don't know. Leave a message in the comments, if you're seeing this too, I guess. But this idea of passing the buck and, like, guns don't kill people and that whole thing, and like, well, who did it then? And the idea of the person who wielded the axe, like, they're never even brought up, right? It's the axe itself that goes on trial and is ultimately acquitted. Whew, it's a lot. Okay, so Now we are going to move to a totally different holiday. um, at the end of the week, June 19th, from our Slavic friends and ancestors, we have Rusalka week. And this is a very different spirit of things. This is now leaning into our Litha work that we are going to be doing. Um, Rusalka are folklore, mythic beings from Slavic folklore. They were or are feminine entities. They are deeply interconnected with water. And they have a variety of different names as we push back through history. We see that they were called Vodyanitsa, they were called Shutovka, um, and a variety of other names, as well as Mavka, but ultimately it came down to Rusalka, and that's the an old name that was thought to be a really obscure name, and then in the 20th century it became the most popular name. Now, Rusalka in the modern era are thought of as evil creatures. They're these evil women that live in the water and will drown people that get too close to the water's edge. In particular, this week, Rusalka's week, you're not supposed to swim in the oceans or the lakes or the rivers at all. You're just supposed to stay away from water sources entirely. If you remember last week, we also had that Hindu observance that was like a fast where you don't drink any water. And also, we're about to walk into the monsoon season. We're about to walk into Cancer season, which is, the great watery womb of the universe and all of that stuff. So currently, these entities have a really bad reputation. They are thought of as evil or malignant in some way. However, uh, side note, their name, Rusalka, connects to the Latin Rosalia. And we already talked about Rosalia a few weeks ago. This is an old Greco Roman festival dedicated to roses and also placing garlands on the military and things like that. At this time, I don't know what the connection is there, other than I know that that festival happens at this time of year, and also this festival happens at this time of year. But I'm sure that there's more to it. However, here is what I think is really important. The original Rusalka were worked with pagan Slavic peoples who linked them with fertility, did not think of them as evil at all before the 19th century. And specifically, they came out of the water in spring to transfer life giving moisture to the fields and thus helped nurture the crops. Now, why I think that this is really cool is that water, in particular dew, is a really potent magical item that we can work with at Litha. And people would run out at sunrise and roll around on the dew covered grass and cover themselves in this dew, this, Litha summer solstice morning dew. Um, People would lay out sheets to collect dew in the material, and then they would wring them out into bottles and use that water for blessing through the rest of the year and other magical acts. Also, the dew that fell on the crops, that fell on the fields on this night was a really big deal. The wetness, the dew, the moisture. And so here we have this entire week dedicated to these moisture entities, these water entities that are directly linked with fertility. And they pop up at the beginning of spring. And here we are at the very, 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 very end of spring, about to step into summer. And here is where they have their week where they're doing their thing. I think it's really cool. I definitely think that these things are connected. Another name for Rusalka are cupola. And we also have Cupola's night and Cupola week at this time connected to summer solstice. So I just think it's really cool. Um, Last little details about these guys, they are connected to birch trees and willow trees. And willow trees often grow right next to the water and are concerned with life and death and passageways between worlds and things like that. So um, we also know that in a lot of traditions, the solstices are considered like gateways or thresholds that we walk through to go to the next portion of the wheel or the year or the cycle that we're in. So perhaps these deities, or I shouldn't call them deities, perhaps these entities also had something to say about our passage out of spring and into summer. Maybe they are, blessing us, right? And thinking of that imagery makes me think about baptism. And St. John is going to be a big figure that we talk about in the Litha class. I don't want to say anymore. And I have so much more to say. Ah, um, but this other holiday, I really wanted to bring notice to because by the time we get together again, this will have passed. Um, so, the Rusalka, I highly recommend doing some research on them and really dig. Get past the 19th century, basically, on anything that you look up on these entities. I think that they are like a lot of evil feminine creatures, quote unquote, that we have now from myth and folklore. I think a lot of them used to be goddesses or demi deities of some type or other like magical energetic personifications of things. And Rusalka could very much have represented the fertilizing waters as they move through spring and across the land, and ultimately culminating in collecting the last bits of that water before we move into summer. All that stuff. All right. That's it, my friends. I hope this week is good for you. Keep your head down. Put yourself in timeout if you need to. Um, don't just check out. Or if you do, put a timer on your checkout, right? Like I'm setting my phone for 1 hour of games. I'm giving myself an hour to check out and play games and doom scroll. But then come back to us. Come back to us. Let's have a snack and a nap and a glass of water, right? All right, that's it. Um, like I said, take care of yourselves this week and play nice out there because some folks probably aren't. Blessed be.